We're going to call the meeting to order. We'll start the meeting with a prayer, with Art Gentry leading us in prayer. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we pray this day for your love and guidance upon all elected officials, that they may serve for the good of all people, that they may recognize the evils of our times. Help us all to be diligent in our voting in the coming elections, that we may vote into office those who understand the need to will the good of others. Especially this day, O Lord and God, may our foster parents and adoptive parents continue to be served by faith-based institutions without fear of state repressions by special interest groups. That faith-based institutions will continue to be available to all of this country's states. We pray that faith-based institutions for foster care and adoptions will be allowed to return to places under state oppression, and thus allow them to serve the best interests of this country's children who cannot choose their own destinies. We pray by your guidance, Heavenly Father, that all that we do be for thy greater honor and glory. Amen.
Amen. Okay, we will have a flag salute led by the oldest veteran present. I think I know who the oldest veteran is, but I'm not 100% sure. Is there any veteran older than, is it 74? Have anybody older than 74? Oh, Alan, okay, so Alan, I think you got the honors again. So Alan's going to lead us in a flag salute. We have a flag right here on the table.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Born and unborn. Okay, before you sit down, let's sing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Thank you. Have a seat. If you want to get food during the meeting, feel free to go in and out. We close the door to try to minimize the noise. I don't know that we're very successful this time. Anyway, we're going to start the meeting with a look at the minutes, which is on a video. Is anybody having trouble reaching the video on the back? If you are, let me know. Just let me leave it at that. If you're having trouble with the website, let me know. Brian and I will try to work that out if you're having any trouble. The minutes are on video now. The treasurer's report is on the back. If you've had a chance to look at the treasurer's report, I will entertain a motion to approve if you've had a chance to see them. Come on in, buddy. Abby, have you had a chance to look at the treasurer's report? I'm looking for a motion to approve the treasurer's report as printed.
I move we accept the treasurer's report as printed.
I have a motion to accept our treasurer's report as printed. Do we have a second to that motion? Al Gentry is giving us a second. All approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. We will now, I want to introduce the speakers tonight, which are all candidates for the Kansas Secretary of State. These people, come on in. These people have a tough campaign ahead of them. They are campaigning in 105 counties, and it's possible that there still could be yet another person jump into that race. But these are the people that are candidates right now.
We have a few more days. I think it's June 1st at noon is that filing deadline. And so if they're not in by June 1st at noon, why this will be our candidates for Secretary of State. So we're going to start this. Here at the table we have, by the way, we have Keith Esau, Craig McCullah, and then we have for Scott Schwab, we have okay, Jaron, go ahead and stand up, Jaron. And let us know where you at and so on. Just tell your situation here.
Yes, so I work on the campaign for Scott Schwab, and I'm a native of Sedgwick County, live right over in Mount Hope on the way to Hutchinson. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here this evening. If you have any questions, come to me. I know Scott couldn't be here at prior event where he is, but next Friday he will be here again in Wichita. The Sedgwick County Young Republicans are going to be meeting at 6 Pizza at their normal meeting location. So please feel free to stop by. If you're not going to be able to make it to that, please come and see me. I can give you his number, his email address, Scott's that is, and I know we'd love to talk to you guys personally if you have any questions. Thank you all for having us and for being here.
All right. He will not be doing an opening statement for Scott, just as a matter of time. But during the question and answer session, we have a chair for him up here. So questions that you would otherwise direct to Scott will be directed to him. And of course, if he doesn't know the answer, he'll take your number or whatever and get back to you, and we'll make sure that question is answered. So anyway, then we have Dennis Taylor down here at the end as well. Dennis is not actually yet on. You're not yet filed? Is that right?
Not yet.
But he's definitely in. So he's here and he's got a spot at the table. So if you've looked at the Secretary of State website, you know he's going to be there before you know it. So we will start here in alphabetical order, giving the 4-minute opening, and we'll start with Keith. And you've got 4 minutes from here. Debbie, you're the timekeeper. Debbie, if you'll flag them or something, or you want to. Okay, or how about that? You can give me a flag and I'll stand up. If I stand up, that means it's time to kind of wind it down. You don't have to cut any sentence off or anything like that. Don't worry about that. But just try to keep it within 4 minutes. That'll give us plenty of time for the Q&A. So, okay, take it away, Keith.
As he said, my name is Keith Esau. I grew up in Buhler, Kansas, not too far down the road here. I went to Tabor College up in Hillsboro. Graduated with a music degree. Went to work at a computer store during the summer, thinking I was going to go to grad school for music. And the Macintosh computer came out, and I said, here's an opportunity. I want to get involved in this. And so I taught myself how to program, bought the development system, started my own company, and started making software to sell on the Macintosh. And a couple of years later, a company up in Lenexa needed some Macintosh expertise, and they bought me out and hired me on, and I moved to Lenexa, and I've been working on computer software for the last 35 plus years. The software I worked on was a spreadsheet software, kind of like Excel, except it was before Excel got all its pretty graphics. We had one of the original pretty graphics on a spreadsheet. And that software went through 5 different companies. I followed the software along. The first company was in Lenexa. The second company was in Overland Park and in London, so I learned to work with people across the ocean. The company after that was out in California. They hired me on and gave me the opportunity to move out there or work from home, but I wanted to raise my kids here in Kansas, so I stayed here in Kansas and telecommuted. And so for the last 15 plus years, I have been working securely and safely with business people all over the world, whether it was Menlo Park, California, or Vancouver, British Columbia, or Jerusalem, or in Taiwan and Japan at times. So I've learned to work safely and securely in the technology field. Part of that, why I say that is because the Secretary of State's office is no longer the paper-pushing office that it used to be. It is a vital technology platform. We keep all sorts of records for businesses, the voter registration records, the lien holding records, so we know who has liens against which properties. It also keeps track of all the laws that are published in Kansas, the official publication of the current laws. If any of that data was hacked or manipulated, it would cause havoc in Kansas, whether it causes havoc at the voting polls because somebody got taken off the voter rolls when they didn't mean it, or whether a business name got changed or a lien record got changed. Any of that would cause havoc. I want to bring my technology expertise to the Secretary of State's office to make sure that we guard against these new cyber threats that are increasing and getting worse day by day. We used to have threats of voter fraud in the front door, and Secretary Kobach's done a great job of guarding, getting voter ID and making sure that we have only citizens voting. I will keep doing that, but also guard the back door now as we see increasing threats against our computer systems. I've also been in the legislature for the last 6 years. I came up through the grassroots. I walked with, starting in the early 90s with my state representative. Then I started recruiting a lot of precinct people. Anyway, I now serve as the chair of the elections committee in the State House, and I'd be glad to share with you some of that experience that I also will bring to the office. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Craig McCullah. I'm also a candidate for Secretary of State. I'm running for the office because I believe we need a professional public administrator to run the office over the course of the next 4 years. A little bit about me. I'm from Topeka, Kansas. My wife and I both grew up there. We met in the first grade. We have 4 kids and a dog, and then when I was away on military duty, they got a cat against my better judgment, but that's all right. I began my career at the Secretary of State's office in 2015 as the Director of Public Affairs and Human Resources. Within 90 days of being at that office, I reinvented the way we did our publications process that automatically saved the agency over $40,000 a year. A year after coming on board, I was promoted to Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. My duties included the IT department, human resources, accounting and finance, our contracting, and in 2016, I became the first voter fraud investigator in the history of the agency. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my goals for the office. I have 3 main priorities for the office. One is to reduce business filing fees. Every year we return $8 to $10 million back to the state general fund. Last year we returned $11 million. Our agency is a fee-funded agency, so those fees should be covered or set to cover the cost of the agency, not to fund pet projects within the Kansas legislature. All right. If we can't reduce the fees, I want to see those fees redirected back to helping the individuals that pay the fees. Most of these are small business owners, and business owners regardless of size throughout Kansas. I think we should be making it easier for them to do business in Kansas with that money instead of funding other projects. My second priority is to improve the Kansas Business Center. I'm a small business owner. I started my first business when I was 25 years old. I understand the challenges of navigating state government. People who are starting their business, they know their trade or their craft or their business. But they shouldn't have to have a bachelor's degree in bureaucracy in order to navigate state government. So what I did was I invented the Business Form Finder. This application allows an individual that wants to start, operate, or grow their business in Kansas the opportunity to go online, pick a series of checkboxes, and get every form that they need to comply with state government in one local location. That application just won an international award. It's phase 1, and I want to continue the progress we've made on that. My last priority is increased citizen access to information. As the only voter fraud investigator in the history of the office, I've come to know what voter fraud is and what it's not. We do have individuals throughout the state that maliciously double vote, but the majority of them are individuals who didn't know the law. The Secretary of State is the perfect position to go out and educate citizens on election law, especially on the Kansas-Colorado border and in the Kansas City metro areas where we see the majority of problems. I'm the only candidate in this race with the experience inside the office. I'm the only candidate who's replaced systems, and I've saved the agency over $400,000 in annual costs year after year. We have some challenges that the agency faces, and I believe I'm the best suited person to tackle it. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Taylor. I'm also from Topeka, born and raised in Topeka, and graduate of Topeka West High School. I also have degrees in business and public administration as well as a law degree. I spent a number of years in the private sector in strategic planning with several national firms, and have also worked inside city, county, and state government in the state of Kansas. In total, I've got a little over 30 years of management experience that I bring to the Secretary of State's office. As a part of my duties in local government, I was an elected county commissioner in Shawnee County. I had the responsibility of voting on budgets for elections for our election commissioner in Shawnee County. I also was the county auditor, and at one time, not when I was commissioner, in a separate position, and had responsibility for auditing the financial records of the county as well as the Shawnee County District Court. In state government, I've been secretary of 3 cabinet agencies and the director of another state agency. In those agencies, I have managed personnel in the hundreds in 2 of the agencies and in the thousands in the other 2. The budgets of those agencies exceed $100 million in at least 2 of those agencies and $50 million in the other 2. I think I'm qualified to run the state Secretary of State's office as a staff of 45 and $5 million in budget. I'm the only candidate in this race who has actually managed a state agency, and those are the 4 that I've mentioned. I'm also the only candidate who's actually been in local government, city and county government. I was also director of strategic planning for the city of Topeka. Those experiences, I think, will help me do a good job in running the Secretary of State's office, because a lot of the problems associated with elections are communication problems. They are between the counties and state government. I've been on both sides of those issues, and I think I understand it and can contribute my expertise, my experience in the past to solving some of those thorny issues that still exist. I understand here in Sedgwick County you've had some of those kinds of issues between the county commissioners and the election commissioner office, and I would try to help from the state's perspective to contribute to solutions to those kinds of issues. In addition, I would just tell you a little bit about why I'm running, besides the qualifications that I've just laid out. I think we need to solve election security problems in this state before they become problems. And I've reduced that to essentially the ABCs. We need to audit elections, which we don't do now. We need to back up the votes that are cast in all counties in Kansas with voter verified paper ballots. About 20% of the counties don't do that at the present time. And we need to constantly, that's the C, we need to constantly verify system security. That doesn't mean waiting until there is a hack. That means going in and testing in a proactive sort of way to make sure that there won't be one. And if there is, that we find it out early, not wait until there's a real problem. So I look forward to your questions as well, and thank you very much for being here this evening.
Okay, if we could get Scott Schwab's shadow, come up here and take the chair.
You want to come up?
Yeah, go ahead and take a chair here. And we'll open this to questions here, and we'll try to let everybody have their at least one question before we get a second. Keep your questions concise. Try not to make a speech of your own. Rather, try to get right to the question. Also, direct your question either to a specific candidate or to all the candidates. If you can save a whole lot of time if you have a question that only applies to one candidate or the other. So if you have a question, show me your hand and we'll take it from there. Okay, I see one back there, Deborah.
Yes, back when I helped with the elections years ago, and my son helped, we had a real problem with the voting machines shutting down, not wanting to work. What would you do if that happened at all in the precincts?
Is that for me?
Yeah, all of them. I'm asking for every one of you.
I'll start this. You just want to go in order? Absolutely. Not every county has the same voter equipment, election equipment. All right. What Secretary Kobach has tried to do, like Mr. Taylor suggests, is having the voter verified paper ballot. All right. I believe there's, about a quarter of the state's voting machines don't have that verification. All right. But as far as the equipment goes, you should always have a paper ballot backup, whether you're doing something on a screen or whatever type of equipment that you have. You do have that paper ballot backup for that. When we talk about elections across the state, we don't have uniform contracts, we don't have uniform equipment, and when we get right down to it, we don't have uniform administration of the elections themselves. We need to make sure that each county is conducting their elections in the same manner. When it comes to the machines, there's a lot of things that we can do to help build the confidence of the election machines. Okay? You'll have a vendor come in and audit the machine or calibrate it. You'll have the election clerk, but we at the Secretary of State's office haven't taken the initiative to go forward and do spot audits on those pieces of equipment. All right. So during the all right, I answered the question. Thank you.
I failed to mention this. My fault. We'll try to keep the first response to a minute.
Okay, that's better.
If we can do that, just so that because we have we'll have a lot of questions here, and we got 4 candidates to talk about it. So go ahead. And by the way, in this case, we'll go clockwise. So Keith, you go next. Then, oh gosh, I'm sorry here.
I guess it's clockwise.
Dennis.
Dennis, and then Scott Schwab.
The election machines are a responsibility of the county clerk or the election commissioner in the larger counties. I assume this was in Wichita and not recently. It's been a few years.
Quite a few years ago, but I understand
Okay. They have since replaced all those machines. The machines that, in fact, the machines you have now are less than 2 years old. So a lot of machines were replaced in the early 2000s, and a lot of those are now being replaced another time. And that's Secretary Kobach has said that if they want any help with the Help America Vote Act money that is still left, that they would have to have voter verified paper ballots. As elections chair, we passed a law this year that says any future purchases of voting machines have to have a voter verifiable paper ballot. So from here on out, if there's a problem with the machine, you talk to the person at the poll and say, I need a new ballot and I'd like to vote on paper, and you'll get a paper ballot instead of one. But the machine produces a paper ballot. It's just that you can have a paper one, or you can have one that's filled out by the machine, again as paper, to drop in. So.
Yes, I think you've hit on something that I just mentioned when I made my opening remarks. First, we need to be proactive. So you're describing a problem that took place. What was being done before the problem occurred is what I'm wanting to focus on. If we can prevent, the old phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what we haven't been doing, I think, as well as we should have, is trying to do that ounce of prevention up front. We've partly, again, it's what I was also referring to earlier, is a communication issue. We've got, as was being described, counties that do things differently in the state, and the central election office, the Secretary of State's office, when there is a problem, I think has a tendency to say, well, that's really county government's problem. And when, of course, then of course, the counties have a tendency to say, no, that's the state's problem. And so then you get that kind of pointing of fingers at each other. Having worked in county government and also state government, I understand that all too well. And an ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure.
And I know it might not look like it. I have a little more hair than Representative Schwab does. But what I think might be a more appropriate use of my time here is I might talk some more campaign issues afterwards. I might just say something quickly about the campaign to let them, the actual candidates, talk about it otherwise. But just to kind of briefly say what Scott's campaign is all about, we have some flyers here. But he served in the House since 2002. And he served actually on the Elections Commission as the chairman during the 2011 when the SAFE Act was passed. And since then, there's been so much change with our election system. So what Scott is really running and what this campaign is all about is to make sure across all 105 counties, we have our election officers and county clerks to make sure they have the resources, training, and skill that they need in order to do their jobs effectively and to run these elections with excellence. And also, we have to make sure that our elections stay secure. And to make sure that there aren't any outside influences coming in and affecting those. So again, I'd be happy to answer more campaign-related questions afterwards, but when it comes to policy, I think I'll let the candidates do it just out of respect.
You can just pass on. You don't have to stand up if you don't want.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Deborah. Next question, Alan?
Should the Secretary of State's, the Secretary of State's office is one of 5 elected statewide offices. Statewide offices are very expensive to run. I just want to know what Kansas is doing to finance their campaign on a statewide basis.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Yes.
Okay. Do I need to repeat it for anybody? Okay, Alan, just to make sure I understand here, the question is really, is what are the candidates doing? Or what is state government doing?
No, candidates.
What are the candidates doing?
To fund a statewide campaign.
How are you funding your statewide campaign? Because it is an expensive campaign. So I guess that's more of a general question. In this case, Dennis, we'll start with you at the end and work this way.
Trying to raise money from Kansas. And I've got a website, a place that you can go to and donate. And I very much appreciate it if you would. There are, as we were discussing a little earlier before the meeting, the governor's race has a tendency to take all the resources in any given year. And in this particular year, with a number of candidates, that's true. The insurance commissioner's race is a hotly contested one in the Republican primary, so that takes some resources. So I think we're down a little bit below both of those races, so it is not easy. And so we look forward to any contribution. I'm sure I speak for my colleagues here in saying that we look forward to contributions from Kansans to help. This is your government. It's not ours. And so obviously, if people want to contribute, they're more than welcome. That's the only way to do it.
You might want to take this one.
Yeah, I can't answer this one. Yeah, but I think that'll probably be it. But Representative Schwab is actually at a fundraising event in another part of the state tonight. He was already priorly engaged to that. But again, just as Dennis was saying, it's all about having citizens from your state hopefully fund the race. Hopefully not getting too many other outside influences on it, because this is, as Dennis was saying, it is the people of Kansas's Secretary of State. So again, there's not a whole lot more to add to it, I don't think, other than making sure, again, to raise money from the people of Kansas in order to fund a campaign.
Well, I robbed a bank. No, I'm kidding. Of course. stepped down from my position as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State to run this campaign full time. I understand there's not a lot of money in the race, and to put a lot of your own money in the race isn't exactly the best return on investment. This isn't a high-paying job, and in fact, I could probably go do a lot more things I can make more money at. But I'm running because I love the office. We've taken donations. I've had to pony up some of my own money, but I care this much about the office. Luckily, my wife and I have a small business that keeps us afloat while I'm not working full-time. I understand not everybody's able to do that, but that's primarily how we're able to run a statewide campaign.
Obviously, we all want donations from Kansans, and we work hard to make those phone calls, go to donors that we know out there, go to family and friends that we've met. I've also worked my way up from the grassroots. I've been recruiting precinct people. I've sent letters to all the precinct people so that they know I'm running and get the ground troops helping. I'm looking. I go to any group that I can, but especially groups like this where you have activists that are interested in what's happening in the party to spread the word. And that, while that doesn't translate necessarily to dollars, it does translate to getting the word out to people all over the state. And you are the people that your friends and neighbors come to find out who to vote for. So I'm raising money from lots of places. I'm also working with as many grassroots people all across the state.
I'm listening to the answers. All right, next question. Brian.
With issues on the federal level affecting state laws along the lines of photo ID requirements for voting and et cetera, what will your approach be to deal with or respond to federal encroachment such as that?
Okay, did everybody hear the question? It has to do with federal encroachment on state laws. And in this case, do you want to try to tackle that for Scott?
Oh, I'll probably stay out of the policy weeds, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Craig, we'll start with you then, and we'll come this way and return down to the other end.
Right now, when it comes to photo ID, the biggest thing we have going is the real ID, all right, which requires individuals to provide their proof of citizenship and other documentation to get the real ID. In 2012 or 2020, I don't think you're even supposed to be able to get on an airplane if you don't have a real ID. That will affect some Kansas, but that won't or shouldn't affect your ability to vote in Kansas. We have a proof of a photo ID requirement in Kansas. It's worked really well. Our voter registration has actually gone up since we enacted that law. I believe it prevents a lot of problems, and I don't really foresee an issue with it. A lot of times people get the photo ID confused with the proof of citizenship law, which is still in federal court. We're awaiting a decision on that. So we'll just have to wait and see where Judge Julie Robinson decides. Federal encroachment, when I think about that, I think about designating election software and infrastructure as critical infrastructure, which our U.S. government just did. All right, that means that now Department of Homeland Security is working with each individual state to ensure that their election equipment is secure.
Photo ID and proof of citizenship, for that matter, are basic, no-nonsense things that most people understand we need to do. Now, I know that there's been a lot of pushback from the Democrats because they would like to be able to get people to vote that can't prove who they are, and we don't want that to happen. I think photo ID will eventually be held up. Whether the proof of citizenship is held up, that remains to be seen. I think this judge will say that no, you don't have to provide that, but it will get appealed up to the next level. And at some point, I think the federal judges need to understand that we have 50 different states for a reason, and one of those is to allow each state to do its own voting system. If we start trying to make a uniform law across the U.S. for voting, the next step is a national voter ID and the national control of elections, which would just, that would be a bad road to go down. We need to keep the system that we have and not go towards a national popular vote or anything that would have federal involvement in the elections.
Perfect timing.
Our elections system right now is a decentralized one, and it should stay that way. The national attempt, even to create a database about a year ago, was abandoned by the president because after due consideration, I think he began to realize and began to have some people tell him that the more we consolidate and aggregate a lot of data in one place, the more vulnerable we are. We have some advantages in being 50 laboratories of democracy in which nobody can really come in and do damage to every system without having to really work at it. 21 states had their election systems hacked, probably by the Russians, by somebody, in 2016. 21 out of 50. But at least they didn't get into all of them, including Kansas. And we want to avoid that, of course, in the future, which is why I want us to constantly verify system security. I think those things are important, and certainly staying away from some sort of consolidated database at the national level is absolutely essential. In terms of the voter ID and the proof of citizenship, I do think that proof of citizenship law, the SAFE Act, is going to be not upheld by the judge. I'm sure it will go up to the next level in terms of an appeal, and likely as not, it will be found unconstitutional at that level, and then we'll have to worry about what we do after that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Art, I'll take your question next, then Myra.
Something that intertwines with voter ID is the ability of Kansas notary publics to verify identification. I've been a notary since 1988 and taught notary law for about 8 years on the website. And it's a problem where now we're seeing in some states false notarizations, where somebody will just get a notary stamp and pretend like they're notarizing something and not even be commissioned or appointed to do so. What are we going to do to tighten up notary laws in Kansas, like I proposed last year? And that is to basically require pre-training and testing and then provide some kind of validation for that.
Dennis, we'll start with you and we'll work this way.
I'm not very familiar with the notary law issue, so I'd be not really giving an honest answer to tell you I have a solution to that problem. I've heard something about it, but not enough to really have an informed opinion, so that's about all I can tell you.
Right?
It's a good question. I believe I'm the only candidate promoting notary education when you renew your notary commission. Every year, our office gets tons of letters. We call them naughty notary letters, where a notary forgot to dot the I or cross the T. Okay? Our main users are our main organizations that have notaries, or your banks or title companies. They do a pretty good job of policing themselves, but it's the individual car lot, or say it's a pawn shop or whatever, that those individuals don't receive enough training on notary as time goes on. So you have to fill out a little packet, or you get we have like the 10 steps of notaries or whatever, the top 10 things you need to know. But when you go to renew, there's no other education requirement. After 4 years, maybe you've only used that notary stamp once or twice. We need to make sure that Kansans aren't being fleeced by a bad notary. So just like when you go to renew your driver's license and they send you the little book, and you go through, every time I get one of those, I relearn something, right? So what I propose is a quick, simple, and free online notary education system where you just get on the computer, You go through, you read a paragraph, you answer a couple questions a couple times, it'll take you 10, 20 minutes, and you've got a decent refresher. I think the response to this needs to be appropriate to the problem, and right now the problem isn't huge, so I don't want to make a giant solution, but right there is probably the best thing what we can do.
I've been a notary for many years, signing up precinct committee people, and yeah, it's very simple because I always double checked the person. I had verification of address from the voter list. I looked at their driver's license if I didn't know them personally. So I would do the proper verification. But that doesn't mean that every notary is doing all the things properly like they should. The notary is usually working for a company. It would be up to those companies in those cases to make sure that they're following the right things, because if there is a complaint, it's going to come back to bite the company, not just the notary. But
That's not true.
it only bites in.
No, because there was a case in Indiana just about 4 years ago called Catras versus Vancouver. A notary working for FedEx notarized a document without the signer present, and it turned out that it was a forgery. FedEx got sued. They appealed it. The appellate court reversed the lower court and held the notary totally responsible for all damages and court costs.
Well, notaries need to be aware of that so that they do things right. When you renew your notary every 4 years, and probably every year, they should get a reminder, at least electronically, that, hey, these are the steps you need to follow. The big thing that we're going to have to look out for now is e-notaries. They are starting to do, Virginia is set up to do electronic notarization, so you can see somebody over the web, and I'm still trying to figure out how they are doing proper verification of the person's identity when they do that, and I would advise people not to do that, but we can't control what Virginia does.
That's almost a joke. It's almost like the whole
Well,
point of having a notary is you check the person.
But it will be coming.
Well,
and we have to find a secure way of doing it.
I guess that might be a good topic for another question here. Myron, you have your question?
Yeah, the question I have is, the in-person voting, we have a photo ID requirement, which I think makes it relatively secure. A concern I have are the advanced ballots. What are your feelings about how those should be, I guess, policed? Two examples. One, in California, 87 ballots showed up with one address. So the 87 people have been registered to vote at that address. And then when I've been out door knocking, I've had people the address is a field. So what kind of controls do you see we need to put on the advanced ballot so that we don't have fraudulent advanced voting?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay, we'll start with you, Keith, and we'll work this way.
Your initial request for an advanced ballot, you have to get it notarized, so there is a check for your ID. So there is a check for ID when you request the advanced ballot. Now the permanent advanced ballots are actually a slightly bigger problem, because once you've done that, you still keep getting a ballot every year. But what the election office does is when that ballot comes back, they match that signature up to make sure it is the same signature or within the differences that might change over the last year or two from the last time. And they keep records of that signature every time that you return an advanced ballot or anytime you sign in on the poll pad. So the election officers are good about tracking signatures to make sure they match and you have the correct voter voting on those advanced ballots.
I didn't know that's good. I didn't know they were doing that. I'm glad to hear they are. We'll work this way. We'll go with Craig next, and then you're last. And we'll give everybody a chance to be first, second, and last here.
the advanced ballots or the mail-in ballots are a necessary evil. I personally wish that everybody could go to the polls, but unfortunately we have military members or senior citizens or whatever that may not be able to do that. The biggest problem I've had investigating voter fraud cases has been with mail ballots and people getting ballots at wrong addresses or them getting 2 ballots, et cetera, et cetera. I personally think the counties do a good job. It's much easier to get a KBI signature expert to verify a signature that's been done in pen than say a signature that's been done on an electronic poll pad. All right. What I would like to see is a photocopy of an ID signed in and filled in with your ballot. But how much are we going to make members of the military who may be overseas or a senior citizen that might not have a access to a copy machine or whatever? What are we going to do or how many requirements are we going to put on them? Okay. I prefer less requirements. I think checking it as it comes in, as the counties do, is a pretty good way to do it. But also we need to do more investigations, not, to go out looking for stuff, but as a preventative measure. We can do that at the Secretary of State's office, and I plan to.
We just heard discussion about how well the election officers are doing with this. Do we accept that? Do we know? Are we sure? How do we know? How are we sure? First part of what I was talking about earlier had to do with auditing elections. We don't do that. What was just being described is a hope. This guy used to say, trust but verify, right? We trust, obviously we trust that the election officers are doing fine. And I don't think anybody's intentionally trying to fail in this effort, but we aren't verifying. We aren't verifying the registration process, the systems of registration to make sure things aren't getting hacked. We're not auditing elections. We don't have a paper trail in 20% of the counties. So we can all be happy. Even your question about notaries. Obviously, if notaries are doing the right job, if they're trying to do the right job, they might be making mistakes. But we're not auditing to find out what mistakes, what kind of training would really benefit them. We're just hoping that if we do a training program, that'll solve the problem. If some of them are actually being nefarious here, they're actually trying to do something criminal or in that sense and not an innocent kind of accident, we're not trying to find that. We aren't auditing to discover that. We aren't being proactive, we're being reactive.
You're very interesting. Also, the training could even make that person a better criminal if they wanted to be a criminal. So, in terms of voter fraud and so on.
Right.
Okay.
Can I provide a response to that?
Sure. Go ahead.
We do verify at the office. In fact, that's how we begin a case. Is we go through and constantly check, whether it's name matches with date of birth matches, etc. If a county alerts us about a signature, we do go through and check. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. I'm not going to argue that point. But we do have systems in place. We just need to beef up those systems and be a little bit more forward thinking on that.
All right. Next question. New question. There being none, well, hold on, Art. I'm going to go ahead and ask my first one. Kansas has 105 counties, and we do have now a standardized voter registration list with the Secretary of State's office, but it still seems to be so out of date. And I want to know what you would do as Secretary of State, how you would maybe encourage the legislature to act, or what you would do to try to get our voters list so that we don't have 10 to 15% of the addresses going to a place where nobody lives, or that are out of date. They're just not up to date. And some counties are worse than others, and in fact, even in Sedgwick County, some areas seem to be worse than others. Obviously, the more affluent areas seem to be more up to date than the less affluent areas. So what would you do to make our voters list to bring them up to date as best as possible. And in this case, let's go ahead and start with Keith and work that way.
Well, there are several things that are already being done. One is the interstate cross-check, and that's to clean up people who have moved out of state but never told us that they moved out of state. And so they have a stale address. Somebody else has moved in that house, so it's still a valid address, but they no longer live in the state. And so that's one way we match up and eventually take people off the rolls. And it still takes 2 presidential election cycles to take somebody off the rolls by law. Federal law requires them, you send out notice and they still have to not vote for 2 election cycles before they can be taken off the rolls. And, so it takes a little while, but it's better to have them on the rolls when they want to vote than to take them off the rolls and find, oh, we took off somebody that we shouldn't have. So there will always be some dead weight on the rolls. That's just a necessary evil. What we want to make sure is that nobody's voting in their place when they aren't actually there. And so that's why we have voter ID and things like that.
The statewide voter registration database is administered by a company called ES&S. We call it the Elvis system. A couple years ago, we renewed the contract with this vendor. It's a very good system. Some of the bells and whistles on this system allows individual counties to talk with the Secretary of State through a secure network via email or a secure email line. No list is perfect. As Keith said, we do the cross-check program. We could be a little bit more progressive and go with ERIC. There's another system that's like the cross-check program, ran through the Pew organization. But also our office cross-references with the Department of Vital Statistics. So we know if we have, someone may have passed away in Kansas, but the voter registration database in and of itself will never be perfect. I would say that when we go out and we do our cross-check program and we see similarities in our system, that's a red light for us. So that's a whistle, and we do go out and investigate to make sure that it is just a coincidence. So at the county level, I can't speak for the county level, but the state level, we do a pretty good job of keeping the voter rolls clean.
I'm not sure I can add a lot to what's been said. Maybe telling a little joke would be a little levity here. You may have heard the story about the woman who died in Denver, who wanted to be buried in Chicago so she could remain active in politics. So there are always those situations in which people are, as was said, moved out of state, died, something that allows them to remain on the rolls because nobody knew anything about it. Whether there's an absolute solution to that, I think is probably in the hands of God. It's not that kind of thing that can really be completely ever handled. Probably there's some things proactively that can be done, just as I was talking about going out and auditing instead of waiting for somebody to come and say, hey, I think there's a problem here, and then we investigate. There's nothing wrong with doing that, of course. When the police hear about a crime, they'll go and investigate. But good policing really is a preventative kind of action. So I would say we do the best we can, and we work at that all the time. We are encumbered to some extent, as was said, by federal law in terms of taking people off through those 2 presidential cycles. And we're never going to be able to solve it completely. We just need to be proactively working at it.
Who had another question? Deborah? Did everybody get a chance to ask their first question? Oh, okay, no, go ahead, Deborah.
I've been a notary for 45 years, and you don't notarize the document. You're notarizing that that's the person that signed the document. You're not notarizing the document or verified documents.
So how is e-notary gonna work?
I don't have any.
Can I slip that question in here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right, so there's our e-notary question, and Craig, we'll start with you, and we'll go the opposite direction. Then we'll go Craig, Dennis, Keith.
So what exactly is the question?
What is e-notary? I never heard of it until tonight. So what is e-notary? Is that something we would ever consider? Tell us anything you know about it.
Okay. There's been a big push to do signatures online. We do them all the time. The federal government has a system of being able to sign by your common access card, or it's like an ID with a chip inside of it. The e-notary is just another step in that. Kansas right now doesn't have the systems in place to do that. If that's something that the legislature wants to pursue, then they'll have to pony up the money for it, and then we will figure out a proper way to administer law. But right now, there's no talk of e-notary within the office, but there may be some in the legislature.
You have anything to add to that? You don't feel like you have to.
I just know about it because I've had a couple of lobbyists come into my office and ask about it. Nobody's really pushing for it in Kansas. In fact, most of the businesses don't even like the fact that Virginia is doing it. It's causing problems. So hopefully it does not catch on and come to Kansas, and it gets quelled in Virginia, or they find some secure way of doing it. But right now it's mostly an experiment going on in Virginia.
You have anything you wanted to add to that, Dennis?
The only thing I might say is, I think the only way to verify it would be having the notary, who's now verified the signature, also verify that they have almost giving an affidavit that they're swearing that what they say in their use of the notary is true. And so now you've got the added burden for actual verification to actually audit not just what the notary did, but to audit what the notary says they did. And so I think that's just going to make it that much more cumbersome. I'd agree. Probably it's going to be a while before we need to adopt that in this state.
We're running out of time, just about the time we're running out of questions. Deborah, if you have another question, you can go ahead.
Yes, my name is Deborah Mahusky, and I recently got married. This is my husband, Ron Mahusky. Now I go to question the fact that we got married. It used to be years ago that you had to wait till the next election come into town to change your name. How do you do it now in the state of Kansas? And what would you do to change it to make it even better, make it easier for those of us that have recently got married to change our name? Yes?
Everybody hear the question? All right, so let's go ahead and start with Dennis and work this way.
As far as I know, name change can be done at any time. There's nothing that prohibits that. You can even change your name even if you didn't get married. You can go in and say, I just want to be called Sue instead of Jill, and the courts will maybe grant that, and you can have a petition for a name change in the district court at any time. So that's one answer. In terms of changing it on the voter rolls, I'm absolutely not sure about this. Maybe somebody else knows for sure. But I think certainly taking either the district court order or a copy of the marriage license to the election commission office will allow that kind of name change to take place, because one is a court order and the second is a valid filing in the county office.
In other words, you don't know for sure what the law is currently.
I
mean, my name's already been changed, that's
Okay.
verified. So what I'm saying is, how is it on the records as far as if I was wanting to change my name and get my ballot sent to my house now, rather than be Sanders, which is what it used to be. I lobbied the legislature. So how would I get that changed quickly?
But well, let me see if I understand your question. You actually have changed your name.
Yes.
And you've changed it. And
It's
you've
already
changed
been changed legally,
and
but I want to make sure my voting registration gets changed also, because I want to continue to vote. I'm a lobbyist.
Have you taken a copy of your marriage license to the election commission office?
No, I have not. I wanted to know what the law currently is pertaining to that. That's why I'm asking.
You know, one of the things the lawyers.
Let's not get into the weeds on a specific case here, but anyway, go ahead. Take
I think I can answer this a little bit more clearly. When you change your name, you need to change your your identification, so your state identification. Once you do that, the best way to make sure your name is changed within the voter registration database is to re-register to vote. It's that 9-question form. Takes a couple seconds, and you can do that. You can also go back and verify through your county election office before the election occurs to make sure that that name change went through and that voter registration is now current. Every time you register to vote, it cancels out your last registration. So it doesn't matter if you're changing a name or an address. You really just fill out that card again, and you're good to go. Yeah.
Nothing to add to that.
I was gonna say the same thing, and you can always check also on the Secretary of State site and most county election sites. You can look up your current registration by putting in your name, first and last name, and your birth date, and it'll show that to you where you're currently registered, when you voted, and things like that.
Okay, Art, I'm gonna go ahead and give you the last question.
Okay. First, I want to state too that I used to be a real estate licensee in Kansas, so I wasn't just a voter Republican. But since I did a lot of at-home loan closings for over 20 years, my record is probably close to 140,000 notarizations that I've done.
Wow.
I have not yet been given a naughty notary letter yet. So.
That's good. I'll get one in the mail.
I knew my draft neck would extend here. Anyway, so the things that you talked about early on was about cybersecurity. And of course, that intertwines again with electronic notarizations. Sedgwick County can receive electronic notarizations from out-of-state notarizations that are done. If somebody is out-of-state, does a loan closing or something, they are capable of receiving it, but we're not allowed yet, or in state notary law, to initiate an electronic notarization. So I'm hoping that we keep it that way.
Okay, so that's not really a question, that's fine. I will ask the last question then. Kansas has a kind of a strange situation, maybe other states have it too, where we have one breed, the populous counties have an election commissioner, and I'm sure that the coordination with the Secretary of State is going to be different for a county that's large enough to have an election office, an election commissioner's office, versus the counties that just use the county clerk for lack of, wouldn't be a position that would be a full-time position to do an election office in a county that's not very populous. The problem is security issues in these counties is like, I would think it's wide open. I mean, it ranges from really bad, from what I've seen, to, maybe perhaps Butler County, probably just as good as Sedgwick County. What would you do to standardize, or would you standardize to try to bring us at least, if not a system that has basically 100 different ways of doing it, at least standardizing some of the stuff that the counties that operate with only a clerk do, or should everybody have a county election office, even if it's a part-time job? What are your feelings on standardizing and not having such a patchwork of different, not only election rules, but some of this stuff is done, we've always done it this way type stuff, and they are not all run the same, and I see a problem there. So let me put it in question. One, do you see a problem there? And number two, what would you do to fix that? We'll start with Craig, and then we'll go to Dennis, and then come back to Keith.
So in Kansas, we have 4 counties who have election commissioners that are appointed by the Secretary of State: Sedgwick, Wyandotte, Johnson, and Shawnee. I think when Douglas County surpasses about 100,000 people, then they would get an appointed one as well. I have to double check my facts on that. The rest of the county clerks are elected officials. And the legislature just passed a law to where it took away some of the power of the election commissioners in those 4 counties to decide what the budget will be on elections. It's the county that's paying for the election. They have the power of that purse and should, be in control of that. So I don't necessarily disagree with the law. In fact, I do find a little bit curious that the state government has decided that some counties will get an appointed election commissioner and some counties get to elect their election commissioner by way or through the county clerk. Personally, at Shawnee County level, I would rather elect my election commissioner, but I don't get the choice. The choice is made through the election of the Secretary of State and his appointments. So if I was king of the world, I'd say everyone gets elected or everyone gets appointed. Preferably, I like the election process. The second part of your question was about standardizing everything across the board. Well, it gets down to a local control issue. Is the state of Kansas going to mandate that a specific county buy a certain piece of equipment for a certain price, and just keep laying on mandate after mandate? Okay, I think we need to give the counties parameters. We have parameters about the canvassing process. We have parameters about how the elections are supposed to go. But when it comes to equipment, we got to say it. The equipment needs to meet a specific criteria, and then you can go out and shop your whatever you want to get. But as long as it meets those parameters, so that's how I would approach it, because I agree with local control.
Good answer.
I'd mentioned earlier that I'm the only candidate amongst any of us on the Republican side or the Democrat who's running who's actually served in local government, and also have obviously served in state agencies as well. So I understand the communication problems that often exist. We've created, about 55 or 60 years ago, a bifurcated system in which we have authority on the one hand and responsibility on the other, between the counties who have responsibility for paying for elections and the Secretary of State in those 4 counties who has the appointment authority. It's not the best system in the world. It's been there for a long time. I don't have any expectation that in 2019 the legislature is suddenly going to say, oh, we need to solve this by making everybody an elected official instead, or going back and having the county clerks in those 4 counties take over the responsibility. So what's the answer then if the legislature is not going to act? My solution to that would be, as I've described a couple of times already, would be better communication, better working together, better collaboration and cooperation. That would also govern the other part of that question, which is should we have a one-size-fits-all sort of policy? The Wichita County versus Sedgwick County and Wichita are very, very different places. And so certainly some sort of standardization at some level needs to take place, but we also have to account for the differences that exist operationally between a part-time kind of operation versus one that has several, maybe a larger staff in the election commissioner office than even exists in the Secretary of State's office. There has to be an understanding of that. And those kinds of things, if it was so easy that we could solve it, it would have been solved long before now. It's really a question of working together and working from the local level and the state level, and I think I can do that.
Thank you.
We have 105 counties with 105 different ways of doing elections. What we need to standardize a few things. One is how we communicate that information back and forth between the election, between the Secretary of State's office and the county clerks and the election offices. A lot of this is handled through rules and regs on the way that certain procedures are supposed to be done for elections, but still allowing each county to have the flexibility in which machines they buy and how they maintain their systems, and the number of precincts they have, and the number of election workers and things. This year we changed it so that instead of the election commissioner having complete control over the budget, the county commissions can now set the budgets. This would be good if the county commissions keep in mind the costs of doing an election and aren't just looking for another place to cut costs because it's something that they want to spend more money on roads. You can delay putting out a road. You can't delay things with the election. You can't make the election lines immensely long. You can't, the one place to cut budgets on the election commissioners is in the number of election workers and the number of polling places. And so I'm hoping the 4 big counties realize the responsibility they have taken on in the elections budgets to make sure that there are enough poll workers and polling places, and that comes back on the people. Because the election commissioners are appointed by the Secretary of State, it's not the Secretary of State's fault if the county's not allocating enough money to have enough polling places. So that's something to keep in mind there too.
All right. Well, let's give these gentlemen a big round of applause. We want you to know how much we appreciate you being here. We will be making an endorsement in this race, and we will be publishing that. And of course, nothing's going to happen until after the filing deadline. But very much appreciate each of you being here. Appreciate you being here for Scott. And I wish you all a safe trip home. You're welcome to stay here. We have a few more items to take care of on the agenda. If you have to leave immediately, feel free to do so, but I'll be done here in about 3 minutes, I expect. So, okay, so on the agenda, we are now down to item I on the new business, and we do have some exciting new business listed there. The National Federation of Republican Assemblies is going to meet in Kansas this year. It's actually in conjunction with the National Right to Life Convention. So many of the people with the NFRA, which is the head organization, we are a state subchapter of NFRA, which, by the way, is the largest ancillary Republican group, the largest ancillary political group, Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or otherwise, the largest group in America. And we're very proud of what we're doing. We have our national meeting here on June 30th in Overland Park. Your address and everything is listed there. You can't sign up right now, but in a couple days you'll be able to sign up, and you're welcome to come. You do have to be a member of a state subchapter, but that's as easy as a $10 membership. We make it very easy to be a member, and this would be a good year to go. You'll meet some fantastic nationwide, nationally known people, and Louis Gohmert, some of you might have heard of him. He's oftentimes there. Ted Cruz may or may not be there. His dad will for sure be there. We've got lots of people that, well, we've got our secretary, our national secretary works in the White House now. As you know, we helped Donald Trump. In fact, Donald Trump got his first lift from being a nobody to a candidate by being at an NFRA convention in Tennessee in 2015, not 16, 2015. That's where I met him and had a chance to talk to him one-on-one. So these are very interesting meetings. You might want to consider coming. Because of the dates, it runs from June 30th through July 1. Because of that running so late, and because of the way the calendar's set up, there's no way we can have a local meeting in June and the national, and take care of the national. So if you want to go to a meeting in June, it's going to be in Overland Park. So anyway, hang on to the agenda if you need your information on that, and we'd love to see you there. Let me know if you're going. I'd like to get a count. Once in a while we have people show up. I'm sure we're going to have some of the same people from Overland Park that will show up anywhere in the country, sometimes with talking to me first and sometimes not. But anyway, I'm sure they'll be there since it's in their hometown here. So anyway, on to item J on the agenda. The Wichita Pachyderm will not meet tomorrow. The Pachyderm Club is closed because of it being tomorrow starts the Memorial Day weekend. And so then, as I say in item K, we have no meeting in June, but our next meeting will be July 26th. If you had an email of this agenda, discard that because I had to change that after I realized what the calendar looked like. So, Okay, I'm ready for an adjournment motion. Thank you, Art. Art Gentry is moving that we adjourn. Oh, hold on. Oh, yes, hold on here. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. I'm sorry. We had a dignitary has come. Him has shown up. Clark, we're honored to have you. Would you talk to us for a couple of minutes? Come on up here by the flag and talk to us and let us know what's going on in your life. You're not a governor's candidate. It really surprised me.
That's right. Thanks, Mark.
You bet.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate these guys being here. I enjoyed that. It takes a lot of energy to travel across the state. I've done it before, so I really appreciate them. And thank you, Mark, for giving me a couple minutes to speak. I'll make this quick. I'm running for the insurance commissioner.
Go by the flag so we get you on.
Sure.
You're talking to the camera up there.
All right.
Oh,
okay, good.
Okay.
I'm running for insurance commissioner. I'm the assistant insurance commissioner now.
What's your name?
Clark Schultz. I've got cards for you to remind you. But the state law says that the insurance commissioner will be well-versed and experienced in the industry. So what makes me well-versed and experienced? I've been licensed since 1999. I've worked at the agency level, sending in forms to the department and so forth. I was an auditor for 10 years where I went around to companies, made sure they were complying with state and federal law as needed. I teach the insurance class at Washburn University, and I was in the legislature for 18 years, both as a representative and as a state senator. And I was chairman of the insurance committee for 10 of those years. Then in addition to that, I've been at the department for about 3.5 years. And as I said, I'm the assistant insurance commissioner. So that's the experience.
Who's running against you?
My opponent in the Republican side is Vicki Schmidt. She's a state senator. Unlike this race, or really any statewide race, there is a huge philosophical difference. And that's, I would say, if she were here today, I would say the same thing. That is the truth. I'm pro-life.
She's not.
And if that is meaningful something to you, you will probably want to support me.
Is there anybody else going to get into the race, do you think? Because that race has been, we've had years where that race has had 4 or 5 people in it.
Yes, it did 4 years ago when I ran. So I remember this. A Democrat joined the race today. He is from Kansas City, don't know much about him, but the primary is what I'm looking at this point, which is of course August 7th, as these guys know. And please call me if you got any questions. I've got cards, I've got my actual business card, and thank you so much, Mark.
Well, we'll just stay up here, Clark, for a second. Anybody have a question directly for the Deputy Insurance Commissioner?
Yes.
How would you close down a predatory insurance company that automatically defrauds their customers? I know what Dairyland Insurance is causing a lot of problems, especially with the elderly.
We take complaints. We've had 20,000. We had 18,000 phone calls last year. We answer the phone, by the way. You don't get a recording. And we got NerdWallet, which is a personal finance website, did a secret shopper, and they called all 50 plus the department, all 50 of the states plus the territories and District of Columbia, asked them a specific question. We were number 1 in getting back to them in 7 minutes and answering a question. When we have consumer complaints, we have a market conduct division that investigates complaints. We have a consumer division. If it's just one consumer that is having a specific issue, we also have a financial surveillance division, which goes, and we're there to protect consumers. You have an issue, you have a problem with a company or a series of companies, you let us know, we investigate.
I got a number of people that have problems with this company. I need phone numbers.
Okay, let's talk later. Let's get, Alan, you had a question for Clark?
Well, first of all, I know some people would in a way, like to see Vicky win just because they get her out of the Senate.
Not a good reason.
But the big fear is that she'll just follow the footsteps of Captain Sebelius. Sebelius, as you know, took 4 years to just basically run for governor, even though she was the insurance commissioner. I don't know if that's what Vicky is really trying to do or not. But my big question is that when she ran for the Senate against Joe Patton, she raised over, was it $200,000 or $300,000 for state Senate. So she's got the capability of raising the money to run a statewide race. The question is, are you developing the same type of campaign treasury?
Well, in November, December, I raised $128,000. She didn't get into the race until later, so I already have that gigantic start. Second of all, yes, she raised a lot of money during the primary for the state Senate. The issue was education, the brownback tax cut, and that generated a lot of interest. It's a little more difficult to generate a whole lot of interest in some of the statewide, as these guys are finding out, and the insurance commissioner is as well. So, but to answer your question, yes, we're out raising money.
Just my own personal opinion, supported you last time. You didn't win, but we supported you and we thought that you were the best again.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you very much.
I have two last questions for you, Clark. One is, do you ever give up? And number two, do you eat Energizer batteries for breakfast? You got more energy than anybody I know. You're always around. The fact that you're here tonight is just so typical of you.
Well, I appreciate that. And you also have to understand that, you know, in 1996, I ran for the House of Representatives. I have a very good track record until, you know, last time it was 2014, ran for insurance commissioner. We had some good candidates. I didn't come out on top. It's just like these guys here. We got 4 guys. They're all great guys. And 3 of them aren't going to win. And that's a horrible thing to think about, but it's true. And, you know, so I'm probably at the point, if I don't win this one, I'll probably go off into the sunset.
I doubt it. Okay, someone said they were going to give me a motion to adjourn. That was Art Gentry. Do we have a second to that motion? Deborah is seconding the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. And now we can sit down and eat. We'll have time for that.